Hello, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Douglas Johnson. I am a certified yoga teacher at the advanced 500-hour level. I am an ordained minister, kirtan artist, amongst other things. Today, I wanted to speak a little bit about triggers and trigger points. Before I get into the talk, however, I do want to thank the community that make these talks possible. You see, you might see me here talking and figure that this is just me or coming solely from the goodness of my heart, but that would be inaccurate. There is a community of people on Patreon that make a financial contribution that allow me to do this work in the way that I want to do it, where I offer it free of charge, because I know there are some people who maybe can't afford to access this content and yet could benefit from it. So what you're seeing here is a community effort in reality. If you'd like to join that community, please check out the links and you can join for as little as $1 a month. You can also join for free. So if you get a lot of value from this content, there are certain things that I can post on Patreon that I can't do here. So if you're really interested in everything that I'm doing, that would be the place to check it out. So thanks to all the patrons that make that possible. Thank you to everybody on YouTube who shares, likes, comments, subscribes. That really does help as well, although in a slightly different way. So, triggers and trigger points. This is coming to you just from my own personal work. Some of the things I share with you come from scripture. Some of the things I share with you come from study with my teachers. Some of the things I share with you come from, I don't know, intuition, if you will, a download, a knowingness, something like that. And then other things just come from my own personal experience. And so this is one of those talks. I've just been playing around with something. I'm on the edge with my own work. And I just wanted to share what I've been discovering and finding out. So, as many of us, as we go through our life, we will encounter bodily pain and discomfort. And this can come from something like an injury. This can come from simply just aging, getting older. Many of us just begin to experience aches and pains in different places. It can come from a host of different reasons. I think, though, most people who live long enough, they experience this in some form or another. And not just bodily pain, like you fall, hurt yourself, you're in pain for a while and then you heal, but what we might call chronic pain. So pain that doesn't seem to heal, pain that doesn't seem to go away. And this is very interesting to me because personally, I have no way of proving this. So this is where, again, I'm talking about sort of intuition. Personally, I just have this deeply held belief that our default isn't just this state of pain. Now, again, I know many people, as they age, that's what they begin to experience, just more and more pain, more and more inflammation. Again, we have all the explanations for it. With science and medicine, they tell us there's just more and more inflammation. But again, this isn't a science channel. We're not trying to understand things from that perspective, because what at least some on this path have experienced is they are able to actually transcend what science tells us is possible using the spiritual. Okay, so just because science says something isn't possible, science only knows what science knows. Science has only proven what science can prove at this point in time. It doesn't mean it's ultimate truth or that that's the final word on something. So I'm a huge fan of science. I'm not trying to disparage it or put it down, but it has its limits. And as far as I can tell, as far as I'm aware, spirit is completely unlimited. We don't know what. I don't think spirit has a limit. So this is where spirituality decouples from the conventional viewpoint, from what science and medicine say are possible. So, you know, maybe science and medicine tells us that it's normal to have chronic pain as you get older. But I have a hard time accepting this. This is just my own, again, it's an intuition, it's a feeling that this can't be right. And I might be proven wrong. Who knows? So again, this is where I was saying this is my edge. So this is not something that I can prove, even in my own experience. This is something I am working on or working with, if you will, okay? So you have to accept this for what it is, this talk. But what I've noticed with my own journey is that if there's pain somewhere, the most effective way that I've found to heal it is to actually elicit that pain, to pull that pain up, to do something. And I'm talking again about chronic pain, which needs to be distinguished from an acute pain. And this applies both to triggers and trigger points. So again, if I have a fresh wound, let's say I'm actually bleeding, I have a flesh wound and the flesh is exposed, and then let's say I take a finger and I poke it and it's painful. Well, poking it is a bad idea. You need to let the wound heal first. So an acute phase of an injury is a phase where we need to lay off. We need to let some time pass. We need to let things kind of cool down a little bit. And sometimes that's the only phase. Something happens, it's painful, and then it's over. And there's no residual pain. Okay, so physically talking, there's no chronic pain. Talking psychologically, there's no leftover trauma. Right? Maybe you have a fight with somebody or very difficult time, but it doesn't leave an emotional, mental, psychological scar. And same with the physical part. We have an injury, but then that part of the body heals completely. This isn't a problem. I think this is really how it should be. Should be. I say that with quotes, knowing that they're, in a sense, that doesn't really make any sense. It doesn't really apply. So, acute phase, and this is something you need to determine either on your own or with a skilled teacher or practitioner, healer, someone you're working with. If I am in the acute phase, then I just need to chill out. I need to rest. I need to give myself some time and some grace and some peace. Again, for some emotional or physical things, this will be enough. Time will heal the wound. However, what we might find is that the acute phase finishes and there is a ongoing chronic problem. So physically, this might be chronic pain. When you move in certain ways or do certain things, there's a pain that elicits. And then psychologically, emotionally, you might find when you interact with certain people, you get very upset. Or maybe you avoid interacting with certain people because, again, it's painful. Same with moving your body. Okay, so you might avoid certain movements because they're painful. I don't do back bends because I have a bad back. This kind of thinking. So again, I'm drawing a parallel here between the work that we do physically and the work that we do psychologically, because this truth applies to both in my experience. Again, this is my edge. This is where I am working. So some of you know I've been through a dark night of the soul recently, and I feel that I've healed from that, but it was a very difficult period, and this is how I was able to heal it, what I'm going to share with you today. So once we're beyond the acute phase, and it's very important to determine that, once we're into the chronic phase, yeah, my hip just hurts, and it's been hurting like this, and it's not going away. It's maybe not getting worse, but it's also not getting better. And I'm not giving medical advice, just so you know. So you follow this advice at your own risk, and I'm not going to give you anything specific to your situation. So this is not something that I can give you that. We would need to work together and experiment, because that's how I work with it. I haven't found any method that I can share with the world. It's a more abstract idea that I'm sharing with you today. So how you apply these ideas will probably be unique. And then again, additionally, you do so at your own risk. So what I found is that I need to find ways to elicit the pain. And with physical stuff, this is very often, again, what we might call trigger point therapy. So finding areas where I might use one of my fingers, I might use a lacrosse ball or tennis ball or some other type of self-massage tool, and I find a spot that's painful, and then I rest on that painful spot, and I breathe and I relax. So in a sense, learning to relax with the pain, if that makes sense. So being with the pain, eliciting the pain, and then being calm and relaxed. And what I found, and this is the reason I'm sharing this today, is because I had a session with my massage therapist yesterday, and I've been working on an area in my body that I've had, it seems to be triggering chronic pain in different areas. And I've spent quite a bit of time recently working on this area. I did not communicate this to my massage therapist. I've just been doing it because it felt intuitively like the right thing to do. Well, he was working on my body yesterday, and he noticed it. He said, "Oh, this is way better than it's been, and all the scar tissue is breaking up," and he could feel that what I was doing was healing my body. And again, my whole approach was that this is painful, and so I'm going to lean into that pain. I'm going to allow that pain, but I'm going to relax with it. And the more I've been doing this on this very painful area, the better it seems to have gotten. I have more range of motion, pain-free. It's just less and less pain. It just seems to be getting better. So again, this is where I intuitively just was like, this seems to be working, so I'm going to keep doing it. So he noticed, and he gave me that positive feedback without me eliciting it, without me saying, hey, yeah, I'm doing this, is it working? He just noticed. Very intuitive individual, but he was able to feel. He works with my body on a regular basis, so he's able to feel the change or the difference. And that's on the physical level, okay? Which for many of us, that's very important. And I do want to bring up a point here, which is ultimately there isn't really a separation between what we call the physical and the mental. You could say that the physical exists within the awareness or consciousness, our physical experience. I don't want to get into a metaphysical discussion today about what that means. I can very much back that up if you're interested. I can do a talk on it at some point if people want me to, but we tend to think of awareness as being inside of our physical forms, but really the truth is the entire physical universe exists inside of our awareness or consciousness, depending on how you're using those terms, okay? So I just want to make that very, very clear. So this is where we can draw the parallel between the physical and the psychological or the mental, the emotional. Physically, we have a trauma, right? We have something happen. And I'll just mention that you can have chronic pain show up without a specific event. I think this tends to be as you get a little older. I don't think young people experience this as much, but who's to say? There might be someone out there who's very young who's suffering from chronic pain, and of course it does happen. So, but if you've never experienced this, if you're young and you're like, you know, I've only had acute injuries and then they always heal, or the only chronic pain I have is from an acute injury that seems to have not completely healed. Usually if you get a little older, you can start to have these things where one day your back just starts hurting or your hip just starts hurting. I'm not saying there isn't a cause, you know, something that you did. There could be, very well, could be, but you may not know what that is. It's not like when I was younger, if I had a pain somewhere, it was usually because something very dramatic happened, right? I fell and hit my knee and then my knee hurts, something like that. I didn't tend to have pain that just showed up out of nowhere. As I got a little older, that started to happen. So, with the psychological side of things, as I said, we can have a similar thing. We might have a very unpleasant exchange with somebody, and it might be very, very unpleasant. And yet, we emerge from that, in a sense, unscathed. There's no trauma that we're carrying with us from that. But many of us will have experiences, especially from when we're younger, and this is where it can get really tricky. It's like when we're young children, we're very physically resilient to damage and injury, but psychologically, we're very, very vulnerable. More vulnerable than I think we are at any other time. We're very impressionable and very malleable. So it's very easy for an adult or somebody in our world, could even just be a sibling, for them to create a psychological trauma, and we don't even know it's there. We're not even aware of it. So these show up again with muscles in the body. We have what are called trigger points. When you press on it, it's very tender. It hurts a lot. And again, the way that I've been able to move my body forward in its healing journey is by finding these tender points and then triggering them and then learning to relax with that pain. And then it's like the pain gets assimilated or dissipates or releases. Okay, and the more that I do that, the better things become. Now again, it's not medical advice. You might have a unique situation. You need to find your own way forward. I'm just sharing something again that I found of value. So psychologically, I found the same is true. In life, we will have what are called triggers. These are where, just like I was saying, if I press on a part of my body and it's healthy, I will feel an appropriate amount of sensation. If I push on my shoulder right now, it's not injured. So I feel the pressure of the touch, but it's not exaggerated. Whereas there are points, other points in my body, trigger points, where if I apply enough pressure, if you're too gentle, you won't feel anything. But if you apply enough pressure, you can feel that there's a lot of pain underneath. It's very tender underneath there. That's a trigger point. Now, we have these physically, but psychologically, we have what are called triggers. Now, a trigger is a very similar thing. I'm in a situation, and yes, it might be unpleasant. It might be uncomfortable. But what I find is I have an overreaction, right? Just like if I press on my shoulder here, there's a little bit of sensation. Now, of course, if I dig far enough in it, at a certain point, it starts being painful because you're doing damage to the tissue. Okay, so you need to be clear about that. Same psychologically. If somebody is truly imposing their will in an unsafe or overbearing way, at a certain point you might get upset or angry. You might lose your temper. You might set a boundary. And this is not a bad thing. This is a healthy thing. What I'm talking about with triggers, and I've seen this all the time, it happens all the time, is a trigger is where we are, our response, or I should really say reaction, to a situation is not appropriate. So perhaps I had an instance where I saw a friend and I had mentioned, I was like, "Are you okay? Because you look kind of tired." They didn't seem like their normal, vibrant, happy self. And so I had concern for them. And they turned right around and said, "That's not nice," and then walked away. I could tell they were upset. Later they apologized. They mentioned that somebody in their life had would say a similar thing in a very uncaring way. And they would often comment on their physical appearance in a disparaging way right after saying that. And so they had this trigger, okay? So this is, again, somebody is applying pressure or whatever, the situation is bringing something up, and then they had a inappropriate reaction or response to that. When someone is expressing concern and they're saying, you know, "Are you okay? You look tired," then you might say, "Oh, really? I feel fine." Or you might say, "Yeah, I am tired." This person admitted to me that they actually did have a lot on their mind, so that was apparent there, to me anyway, thus my concern. And so, again, my inquiring about that was actually justified. I was actually right in my assessment of the situation. Something was going on with this individual. But because it was a trigger, she interpreted my concern as, you know, something like a insult, or I wasn't saying something nice, like, "Oh, you don't look good." what's wrong with you? You look tired, kind of thing. So I don't know if this is the best example, but I'm trying my best to illustrate what I'm talking about here. A situation, again, it's like the finger on the part of the body. If the body is healthy, if the psyche is healthy, we can apply a good bit of pressure, and it's not that there is no response. There's a healthy response. There is an appropriate response. Again, someone asks you a question, you know, are you okay? You look tired. The appropriate response might be, oh, really? I feel fine. Or, yeah, I'm actually going through a lot right now. Not, that's not nice, and then walking away. Or that's really mean. I don't remember the exact words. But again, this is an inappropriate response. This is a pain. It's a trigger. It is what we call a reaction rather than a response. So this can be tricky because we may really feel justified in our triggers and our responses. We might feel like the other person is doing something to us. So it can be really, really tricky to know what is a healthy boundary. Where am I being healthy in my limits and how much exposure I allow myself to something that might be dangerous? Because again, if I just keep digging my finger, digging and digging and digging and digging, at a certain point I can create damage, at least in certain parts of the body. So just allowing somebody to keep applying pressure isn't necessarily the healthiest thing to do. And this can happen in spiritual circles where people think they're being spiritual by not getting angry, by turning the other cheek, by constantly giving people the benefit of the doubt. All of these things can be appropriate on a spiritual path, but they must be used. These are tools that must be used with care. And if we're not careful, we will use spirituality actually just to continue repressing these wounds. So, what do? We're in a situation and we get triggered. Well, like I said, like with a physical injury, and this comes from my recent experience with my dark night of the soul, I needed time to heal, and I didn't quite understand that when I was going through it. It felt like nothing was working. This approach that I'm sharing with you, it felt like it wasn't working, and I think because it wasn't. And again, this is what I'm here to share with you. The wound was so fresh that I needed to give it time to heal, if you will, or cauterize, or create a scab, something where I could start to work with the pain. And that took a few months at least. And that's a very important thing. If there's a wound there and it's still fresh, if it's really tender, then you may need to use what I would call self-medicating behaviors. These are actually very often addictive, what we'd call ultimately addictive behavior. There are many different kinds of addiction, by the way. So an addiction, the way that I'm defining it here, a loose definition, is it's something you use to avoid feeling that psychological pain. So some people are addicted to their work. Some people are addicted to socializing and constantly being busy. Some people are addicted to television, binge watching television shows and staring at the screen. Others are addicted to gaming. Some are addicted to porn. There are many, many different kinds of addiction. Some are addicted to eating. I think it can almost take any kind of form. The question, again, is not what is the behavior that we're doing. The question is, are we using this behavior to run away from the pain, the psychological pain the wounding. And again, for many of us, this was done when we were very young. We probably don't remember it. Or if we remember the events, we don't realize the kind of damage they created. So you might find that if there is a new trauma, or if something, you could say, reopened, and it didn't just trigger something, it actually reopened a wound, that for a little while you may need to do these self-medicating behaviors. You may have to soothe yourself. You might have to give it a little bit of time and let the wound not heal completely, because it won't, or it can't. That's kind of the point of the talk. But to settle in a bit. Again, like a scab forming. Once you're past the acute phase of this psychological trauma or pain, then it's much like trigger point therapy. You want to find a way to let those feelings come up. It could be by visualizing a situation. It could be by talking about a situation. It could be, for me, the case was, it was where I am with my work, my psyche feels pretty clear, for lack of a better way of putting it. So when there is something that is not clear in it, it sticks out like a sore thumb. So for me anyway, there was almost no avoiding it. If I would just be quiet and still for any length of time, these feelings would arise. So all I had to do was lay down, be still, close my eyes, and the pain would come to the surface. But this may not be the case for your particular wounding. So you may need to actually find specific ways to trigger the wound. And I'll say this, it's not pleasant. Just like when I am in my home and I'm laying on a lacrosse ball and it's triggering, this trigger point is creating a lot of pain, and I'm sitting there and breathing. It's not, I'd rather be doing something else. The reason I do it is because every time I do it, I find that I have more range of motion before I'm in pain. So again, I'm not doing it because I enjoy doing it. I'm doing it because of the end result that I get. The same is true psychologically in my experience. I've worked with people as a spiritual counselor and done a lot of the more psychological work that's involved in spirituality with people. And this is very much the same. You need to trigger or bring up the thing, the triggering event. You need to feel the emotions. And then, again, the method that I've talked about is learning to relax with those emotions. Learning to breathe through those emotions, allowing them to be there. And just like with the trigger points, the physical body, what I've found is that allowed me more and more to be free of that pain in situations, and in situations that would trigger me. With my personal dark night of the soul, there were many things that were triggering. It was very interesting. I would see things, hear sights, have memories, think of things, and they would all be triggering. It would be very, very, very painful. And again, the more that I did this, the more that I allowed myself time to do this, the more I found that those situations that used to be triggering, no longer triggering. The thoughts that used to trigger me, no longer triggering me. Conversations, all kinds of things. And it feels today like I am free of those triggers. Now, I do want to put a note in here that the psyche is vast, and we don't know what we don't know. So there's no telling. Am I free of those triggers ultimately? I don't know. Again, it took an event in my life to show me that I had that wounding there. I don't think it created the wound. I think it just sort of showed me that there was a wounding there. And again, this is the beauty of these triggers. This is the beauty of going to get, say, body work done. And maybe you feel like you're fine. And then the therapist starts poking around and you're like, oh, that's really tender. Oh, that really hurts. Well, that's a trigger point. And again, in my experience, the way we heal trigger points is to trigger them, and then you breathe and relax. And so life is like this. We go through life, we interact with people, and hopefully we experience a lot of peace, love, and joy. But I think we will all experience moments that are, again, less pleasant. Okay? If it's less pleasant, it comes and goes. It's not a big deal. That's just part of life, right? It's like I said, the finger, the pressure on the shoulder. Maybe it's a bit uncomfortable. Maybe it's more pressure than you'd like, but it's not wounding you, and there isn't a lot of pain there. But if I have an injury in this area, and then I'm pressing down on it, right? I might be like, ow, hey, I have an injury there, stop, right? If someone pushes there, something like that. Again, that's telling me something. It's telling me that this area is wounded and needs to be healed. So that's what this is really all about. This is about healing. And my basic assumption, and again, maybe I will be proven wrong. I really can't say. I'm living this life, and I am exploring these spiritual teachings and ideas that I share with you. But I do have I hesitate to call it knowingness, but it feels a bit like that. There's this guiding principle that I have inside of me that we can heal, that we are meant to heal at any age, that we aren't meant to slowly get sick and have all these problems, that we're meant to live a life full of joy and fulfillment and feel love and gratitude and compassion. And it's hard, difficult, sometimes impossible to feel these things if we're in a lot of pain, physical or psychological. And as I said, I think ultimately the physical and the psychological are really one and the same. You could say the physical is often a reflection of our mental beliefs and psyche. So, eliciting the pain, and there are tools that you can do this with, ways to do this. Again, you could work with someone like me, or maybe you have a therapist who could do this. But the key here that I'm sharing is this next step, right? It's not just bringing up the pain or re-traumatizing yourself or something like that. It is pulling up the pain and then, again, relaxing with it. In a very real sense, being bigger than it is. I think when you learn to breathe and relax with something that is triggering, whether it's a physical trigger point or it's a psychological trigger, in a sense you're saying, I can handle this. I am bigger than this. This isn't going to determine what I can and can't do. This pain, it's not so big that I can't overcome it or transcend it. The relaxation is the key, the peace, if you will. This is a powerful piece that we are trying to elicit. And like many things, it might take practice. But in my experience, and again, I'm not at the end of anything sharing the end with you. I'm on the journey and I'm sharing with you what I've seen so far. Okay, so again, I might have a talk later and say, oh, there's more to it. But this is where I am so far. This is what I've seen so far. And I've had very good results. Again, not just healing myself physically, but also heartbreak. Okay, a very emotional or psychological wounding. Heartbreak's interesting. I did a little reading about it, and the pain is very real. They've measured it, and they've shown that people who are in heartbreak, they often are in the same amount of pain as someone who has a broken limb. So oftentimes when people are experiencing heartbreak, at first they might get a little bit of compassion, but often after a little while people are like, well, just get over it, you know, can't be that bad. But that's like telling someone who walks in with a broken limb, oh, it's not that bad, just get over it, you'll be fine. We wouldn't do that. And so it's worth understanding that heartbreak is very, very painful and very, very real for those going through it. So I can attest to that myself. This was a very, very painful period. But I'm grateful. Again, like a massage therapist who shows us where these trigger points might be. We might have thought we were fine. Another example is yoga, actually. This happens to many people. They might come to yoga class thinking that they are really healthy. And then they start doing yoga, and yoga very often puts your body into positions that you probably wouldn't get into just living your day-to-day modern life. Your ancestors might have, trying to get enough to eat, but in modern times we're so comfortable, we don't need to move that much, and we don't need to move in extremes. And so very often we might not even realize we have injuries or pain. And then we get into yoga class. And yoga very often takes our joints and our limbs to their extreme. It takes them as far as they'll go. And it's at those extremes very often where we will feel the trigger points, where we'll feel the pain. And this is valuable. This is one of the reasons why yoga is valuable. Because again, if I'm doing something and it's painful, that means there's damage there. There's healing that needs to be done. Now, again, you might be very frustrated because you might say, well, I went to the doctor and they told me there's nothing to be done. Again, doctors, God bless them, they only know what they know, and they only know what their training has told them. And it's up to you. I'm not telling you what to believe. I can tell you what I believe. So if you want to believe that if the doctor says you'll never walk again, or you won't be healed, or there's nothing I can do, or nothing to be done, if you want to believe that, you go right ahead and believe that. I'm not here to tell you that you're wrong. What I am here to do is to say that maybe that's not the whole story. Maybe there is something that could be done that your doctor doesn't know about. So again, a core belief of mine is that we are meant to be whole. We are meant to heal. We are meant to feel vibrant and good. And that if we aren't, then that means there's something to be healed. There's some work to be done, if you will. Now, if you work with a doctor or a therapist and they're able to help you heal, then perfect. Maybe you don't need this talk, and that's great. But what I'm working with and dealing with are things that appear to not respond to conventional treatment. And these are things where I found this method to be very, very helpful and useful. Now, again, depending on your specific situation, this may not apply. There are probably situations where this approach in my own life, I wouldn't apply this approach. But it's worked for me, again, both on the physical domain, healing my body, and it's also worked for me psychologically as well. So I wanted to share it with you. So I'd love to hear from you. Is this something that you have an experience with? Have you healed yourself, maybe from an injury or something psychologically, maybe even something that a doctor or a professional told you can't be healed? I believe there are therapists or people who believe or say that trauma cannot be healed. I don't believe that this is true. And again, based on my own experience. And again, you believe whatever you want to believe. I'm, again, not here to tell you what is ultimately true or that what I think or believe is better or superior to what you believe. But what I believe allows for healing. It allows for us to experience this life as beautiful, as joyful, as peaceful. And I can speak for myself that that wasn't something I could experience before I really found spirituality in my life. And this is why I'm a spiritual teacher. And this is why I try and share what I've discovered with you. It has so profoundly shifted things for me in a very, very valuable way that I just feel called to share this with others, like with you. So I'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below. Let me know your experience, or if you try this out, let me know how it goes for you. Again, these talks are sponsored by a community. This is a community-sponsored content. And if you'd like to become a part of that community, please check out the Patreon links below. Until next time, everyone, namaste, and have a beautiful, beautiful day.